folks. I'm Katie.
I'm Vinny. This is Learn Real Good.
Yes, we are here to learn
Real
good. Nailed it. We have a guest today.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. Are you excited to interview a guest?
Yeah, I love meeting people.
I feel like Oprah right now.
I mean, we wish we were Oprah.
Doesn't everybody?
Yeah, they should.
It's a big day. What's new with you, Vin? Before we even get to our facts, just tell our listeners, what's new in Vinny's world.
I'm not used to recording on such nice microphones. You sound great. I think I sound good. It's quite delightful.
It's funny how it makes you change how you talk when you immediately have that feedback
of hearing your own voice in your ears. Yeah, normally you don't have that.
But it's impossible not to have it affect you. Like, it reminds me of college radio. Back in the college radio, just thought I could drop that. When I did college radio, when you hear your own voice, like, it's hard to sound natural.
Yeah, you just gotta do your best to block out that and just make sure that you're talking like your normal self.
Yeah, what is my normal self? Am I normally myself? Is this my normal self?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow. Deep thoughts.
What's your science fact, Katie?
Oh my gosh. So this is our first segment on Learn Real Good. What we're going to do is me and Vinny are going to come at you with some new science facts that we have just learned. And we haven't talked ahead of time.
No, I don't know what your science fact is going to be, Katie.
I'm so excited. So I had to look it up. It wasn't something I came across naturally. And I went on New Scientist, nice light pop sci information. And there was this article that came out recently on bat echolocation.
Oh.
Yes.
What's new in bat worlds?
Okay, so there's this new study conducted through Tel Aviv University where scientists want to explore, do bats innately know how to echolocate?
That's like instinctive?
Yeah, because like birds need to learn their songbook, right? They're not born knowing any songs.
Is that true? I don't know that either.
Yes, and throughout their life they can learn new songs, right?
Whoa.
Brain size is correlated with song repertoire. So they were like, what about bats? So what they did was they took adult bats.
Did they say it like that?
Yes,
Whoa,
I was there.
What about bats?
They took adult bats and they put them in a chamber that had like helium pumped in. So it's going to be lighter than regular air to see how they would echolocate. And they kept missing their targets when they would try to like land somewhere, which I want to see the video. It sounds adorable and sad.
Like drunk bats, basically.
And they're like, okay, well, those are grown-up bats. Maybe it's too old dogs can't learn new tricks.
Oh, interesting.
So they took baby bats.
This sounds cruel.
And raised them in a chamber of helium.
What? Really?
Yeah. And they still kept missing.
So it's innate.
It's innate. That's what they're thinking. But this is sort of
hot bat news. This just in. Bats don't do well in helium.
So if the atmosphere is replaced by pure helium, the bats are screwed.
But we're running out of helium, aren't we?
Well, do the bats know this good news?
Yeah. They have nothing to fear. All of our helium is being used in bat studies, apparently.
Are the bats behind that?
Maybe it's a self-preservation mechanism. They've been holding so many kids' birthday parties.
That's adorable. My mental images are amazing. All these bats with like costumes,
party hats.
People. Yes.
Yeah, that's cute.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's my fact.
That's a great fact.
It's not bad, right?
Yeah.
I was excited to hear that.
You want to hear my fact?
I am dying to hear your fact.
All right. This episode's Vinny fact is there is evidence and growing evidence that there is a ninth planet. Now, normally you think there are 8 planets because we don't count Pluto anymore. There's ends at Neptune.
Speak for yourself.
Well, I will speak for myself and the Astronomy Union, which conventionally agrees there are only 8 planets, Pluto not being a planet anymore. However...
Well, let me guess.
Yes?
Okay, what the new planet is.
Okay.
Is it a moon? Someone else's moon that's being like kicked up a notch to planet?
No.
Damn it.
No. To be counted as a planet, the sun has to be one of the focal points of the orbit.
Okay.
You're just gonna sigh at all my science facts?
No, it's the sun. The sun has to make everything about them.
Yeah, that's how planets work.
They think they're like the center of the galaxy or something.
The galaxy, not the solar system.
That's what I meant. I'm the biologist. I don't need to know
That's okay.
basic children's physics.
Yeah, planetary
Okay,
physics.
what's the new planet?
So no one spotted it yet. It hasn't been directly detected. But so they're, comets, they come from very far away, get close to the sun, then go back out. They're very long orbits, so don't see one for like, Halley's Comet is every 72 years. So there are other long range bodies that have been spotted, and they come close to the sun, but not as close as like a comet, so it doesn't get all bright and shiny. So they're hard to spot, and they're just basically rocks of ice and rock. And there's a bunch of them that they found that all have this like specific orbit that is like weirdly they're all kind of the same, like at a specific angle, and they're grouped together, and it's not random at all. It's like a group of like 13 Oort cloud bodies, or trans-Neptunian orbit bodies, that all come in and orbit in this specific way. And the only way they would all be like that is if there's another planet that's kicking them to that orbit.
Whoa, there's some invisible planet that's kicking comets at us?
Yeah, and it's knocking them into a specific other orbit. It's basically clearing a path.
I'm going to ask a question for our audience who's less familiar with the solar system and space than I. How can we not see a planet if it's that close?
This is great. Well, this is the problem. It's not that close.
How can it be in our solar system if it's not that close?
Well, it's estimated to be 500. The distance from Earth to the sun is one astronomical unit, AU. This is supposed to be 500 astronomical units away. It's very, very far away, but it's supposed to be 5 times the size of the Earth, or at least the mass of the Earth.
How is it part of our solar system if that's
because it orbits around the sun?
That's all it takes.
That's all it takes.
So you can be on the other side of the universe.
Yes.
And once over the course of time,
yes,
make one trip.
Correct.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah. So anything in our solar system is anything that orbits the sun. And so there's a planet that may not be, and it's very far away, so it doesn't get a lot of sunlight. And then that sunlight has to come all the way back to Earth to be reflected off the sun. So it's very hard to see. There might be a whole other planet, like a legit planet. No, I don't know. I think another planet is kind of cool.
You have to update all our dioramas.
Yeah.
What do you call those? Mobiles. Mobiles?
Mobiles? Mobiles.
Potato?
Tomato.
Okay. Okay, well, those are great facts. Yeah. I enjoyed that.
Thank you.
That was very fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed your bat fact.
Bat facts. Each week, a new bat fact. Well, that's enough of us.
Yeah, that's
sharing facts.
It's more than enough of us.
I cannot wait for our interview with our next guest.
Yeah.
This is going to be fun.
I'm excited.
Yes, so I have the pleasure of introducing Kevin Guo. He is a PhD candidate at the Montreal Clinical Research Institute in the lab of Dr. Matthew Farron. He's investigating the possible role of vitamin K, everyone's favorite vitamin, in the prevention of diabetes. Growing up, Kevin had wanted to be either a chef, filmmaker, or scientist. Thus far, he's cooked up countless biochemical protocols and created many movies starring living cells under a microscope. With enough hard work and determination, he hopes to one day become a scientist too. Please join me in welcoming Kevin. Hello,
Hi, Kevin.
Hi, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's a thrill to have you on our podcast.
Am I allowed to ask a question about the science facts?
Yes.
Please do.
Yeah, we love questions.
Interview us.
No, it's just I was thinking about what Katie said about how the sun thinks it's the center of the galaxy. But from a relativistic point of view, if we set the sun as like the focal point, isn't the galaxy technically pinwheeling around it instead?
Whoa. Yeah. Yeah, they're orbiting around each other, man.
Is that true, Vinny?
Yeah.
Whoa.
So the sun can be the center of the galaxy given the correct reference.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why it looks like the sun goes around the Earth. From the Earth's perspective, the sun goes around us.
Did we just take down physics, guys?
It's over. Shut her down. We don't need it anymore.
Problem solved. Sorry, ninth planet. So, Kevin, tell us about vitamin K.
Yeah.
What's the deal with vitamin K?
What is vitamin K?
Yes. Vitamin K. The first thing I think everybody tends to notice about vitamin K is the fact that it doesn't follow the alphabet. Right? You know, if you count vitamin A, B, C, D, E, there's no vitamin F. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
You're being thorough. Good.
Yeah, anyway, so there's a couple letters in between before we reach K, and the reason
Those will remain unnamed to protect their identity.
oh man, yeah, it's a good thing I didn't go into English or something. But anyways, the reason why it's called vitamin K is actually because of the German word for coagulation. It's spelt with a K. And so the guy who discovered it, he discovered it in chickens, actually. And he named it vitamin coagulation in like the sort of German spelling, which is why it's called vitamin K. And I actually think it's part of the reason why this vitamin has been pigeonholed into just like clotting for so long.
That's really interesting. So the other vitamins weren't named for their function, right? They were just named in order. Why? That's interesting.
Well, hang on. There's like 42 B vitamins, aren't there?
Yeah.
There's like A, B, another B, there's like a zillion B vitamins.
And I'm pretty sure there's even like skipped numbers in B. Like
yeah, B16. I don't remember a B15.
You vitamin scientists need to get your shit together. That's what we're here to say.
Hey, at least we're not like immunologists, which named everything just IL number. That's impossible to remember.
Well, I know at least with the B vitamins, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but they all have a related function in metabolism. I think that's why they're all B. So they're sort of grouped by the functionality.
They let us be.
But I don't know the number. What's the deal with the number?
Well, a lot of times you're right, basically, with how vitamin B tends to be grouped by their function as well. But just in general, a lot of times I think this is more just my personal opinion, but when any sort of macromolecule or protein ends up being named for its function, you tend to result in ridiculous situations like this. There are so many proteins out there that actually their name has nothing to do with their function, right? Like a really famous example of this, I think, is what's that protein called again? I think it's target of it's the symbol is mTOR, and it stands for target of rapamycin. And rapamycin is this sort of substance that's found in fungi. And they found essentially that something weird happened with this protein when they threw it on. But it turned out that it was a completely incorrect conclusion. You know, like this rapamycin does nothing to mTOR, but to this day, it's called a target of rapamycin when it isn't actually.
So now this arbitrary lettering system for vitamins sounds a lot better.
Yeah.
It does. At least, you know, if you're not like me and you know your alphabet, you can memorize them.
Interesting. Wow. So what brought you to vitamin K?
So you want the real story or the more scientific sounding story?
Give us the real deal.
Give us the real deal. Yeah.
All right. So at the end of the day, a lot of times when you're in a given field, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with this as well, that there are some people who will research something because they're really interested in this specific topic, and other people who will research something just because it kind of overlaps with their technical expertise. Like maybe they've had some experience purifying proteins, or they have some experience classifying animals or something like that, or they happen to know the right type of programming that is required in like a certain lab that they want to do a certain thing. So for myself, it wasn't so much that I had a specific interest in vitamin K as I knew what kind of lab that I wanted to go into. So I wanted to go into a lab that was relatively young, because, you know, once you join an old tenured professor, sometimes nothing ever happens because they sort of lose that motivation. I wanted to join a relatively small group because I didn't want to, you know, I know many grad students who will join these big famous labs, and you know, maybe their project is just going a little slower than everybody else's and they just kind of get pushed to the wayside. I didn't want that to happen either. And more than that, I also wanted to find a supervisor that I felt could kind of that our strengths and weaknesses complemented. So for myself, I am a pretty kind of crazy, I'll run into your office and tell you some like weird idea that I have kind of person, but I am not organized at all, by nature. So when I was interviewing with this guy, he had, or Dr. Ferrand, he had this really beautiful PowerPoint of, the things that he had discovered, how it linked into where he wanted to go, and the sort of technical expertise that both of us could bring to the project. And I really liked that. The other thing is that he walks around with this blue hoodie with a big eagle, like a First Nations print eagle on it.
Wow.
And he's got he's not really old. I believe he's in his 40s, but he has like gray hair and shocking blue eyes. And he just looks like a wizard. I was like, if anybody secretly is actually teaching lightning magic and is just waiting for like a worthy person, it's this guy. Yeah.
So be honest, Kevin, we're all friends here. Did you join this lab thinking you'd be a wizard?
I joined this lab knowing I'd be a wizard. I am pleased because I mean, it's true, right? Because a lot of what we do in science is really modern day wizardry. Like, I don't know half of half the machines that I do. Like, have you ever worked with a fluorescence activated cell sorter before? That stuff is crazy. Nobody knows how it actually works. Like,
do we look like the kind of people that would work with a fluorescence activated cell sorter?
If I just want to explain it for just a second, it's essentially you take a tube of cells, and based on
one often does.
Yes, sure. But based on the proteins that are on its surface, you essentially take antibodies. Everybody knows antibodies now because of COVID, I suppose. But there are antibodies that are specific for your protein that have this little glowing molecule on it. It fluoresces, and they conjugate it via kind of like a chemical reaction. So you can actually take a mix of cells, you have no idea what's in there, and you throw in, an antibody for protein A, antibody for protein B, C, D. And then you run it through this crazy machine that somehow, by recognizing the color of the fluorescence tag, gives it a certain magnetic charge. It then flies between these magnetic plates, which deflect it just enough that it lands in like specific tubes based on its tag. And I have no idea how it works. I use the machine all the time, but it's just magic. Yeah.
That is amazing. And so you just load up some cells, leave, and you come back and it's all sorted for you?
Exactly.
You're like, thank you, robot.
Would this work on like a Scrabble tile bag?
I've got some socks I'd like to throw at that machine.
I think they already fluoresce, if you ask me. Well, that sounds like a great way to... Yeah, I mean, all of those considerations for when you're choosing a lab to go to, when you're choosing where to do grad school, there's so many factors that go into it, and the ones you listed are definitely near the top.
Yeah, for grad school, I mean, you gotta think about how you gel with your supervisor. I think that's very, very wise of you, Kevin, to have thought that far ahead. I think a lot of people make that error of not thinking about that relationship and how that's going to go, and focusing too much on the school or how it's the project
or the name of the lab sometimes. Yeah,
but that's huge, and that's hard to know about yourself when you're a younger grad student. Like what.
It definitely helps to do a master's first, actually. I think a lot of people, they think they can save time, just fast track, but you really don't have the experience to know what is suitable, where a lab where you can both contribute the most and gain the most from before you kind of have that experience.
Yeah, there's so much pressure nowadays to rush to jump ahead, to skip the master's and level up into a PhD. And I get it from an institute perspective, right? Churn out more PhDs, but from a student perspective, I don't know that it's that advantageous.
I blame it on TV and movies. No, really, because I feel, especially anime, it's terrible. These like 12-year-olds are making these crazy scientific discoveries all the time, and I think it does put pressure on people because they, you watch a movie and the scientist who already has a Nobel Prize is like 30 years old,
Right.
That's just not realistic, right?
Are there really that many animes with scientist characters?
You'd be surprised.
There's quite a few.
Because that's something I don't watch anime, but I feel like in the pop culture I consume, there isn't nearly enough scientists being displayed.
There's so much anime being generated. There's probably an anime with a bat in helium. I'm 90% sure.
We are making that. Helium bats.
There's
coming
definitely an anime with a secret planet wandering the solar system. I guarantee that one. But yeah, I mean, there is generally a huge amount of pressure on people to like. I guess it's a bit universal. Like the faster you complete these so-called milestones, the more ahead of the quote-unquote game you are.
But if you come out because you rushed ahead and you have less publications, which I feel is almost inevitable, that's really the currency that people care about. No one's going to look and say, oh, master's in 1 year, you star, right? They're going to look at the number of papers and quality of papers, and that's a huge way that you're evaluated.
Yeah, absolutely. But even the way that labs put out papers, I think because there's generally two philosophies for putting out papers, right? You can either try to churn things out fast, these sort of small, fast studies, pad your CV, get going quickly, or you can be one of those people who want to make like 3 first co-authors and pull a massive amount of data together, make a huge paper.
For someone who doesn't know what co-authors mean and first co-author and yeah, the average listener might not know. What does that mean if you're the first co-author? Why is that important?
It basically all gets down to how credit is divided. And as Katie mentioned about what sort of matters to us academics, it's any grad student can tell you that we're not paid very much. We're paid kind of below minimum wage for the number of hours we work usually, but our currency is really these publications, right? Sort of getting our name out there, feeling like we've contributed to the field, being recognized for the contributions that we do. And a big way that that's done is the order of authorship on a paper.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times when you see these the author list, it might look arbitrary, but generally how it goes is that the people who directly worked on the project, or let's talk about the professor first, actually. The supervising professor's name will usually always be the last one. And the person who isn't the supervisor and contributed the most to the paper will usually be the first author. And the general way that it's done is that whoever contributes the second most will be second, so on and so forth. There's a little bit more nuance than that, because sometimes supervisors can work together, in which case both of them will be sort of towards the end. And then whoever is like most last is actually the biggest. So if you're a supervisor, you want to be most last. If you're a grad student, you want to be most first. Yeah.
It's an inverse bell curve.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. So vitamin K, I've really in the last couple of years come to appreciate how fascinating it is, because like I mentioned previously, everybody knows it as this vitamin that is involved in the coagulation process. And how it does that is basically it is needed for the activity of this enzyme. So an enzyme is essentially a protein that has this an active function. It spends energy and does things. For example, the all the proteins in your body that essentially create energy for you and allow you to move and whatnot, those are considered enzymes, but they will pull on scaffolding. You know, like for example, muscle, you have the fibers and all the little proteins that pull on those are considered enzymes too.
Nice.
But vitamin K, it's essential for this one enzyme that will essentially make very specific proteins more acidic. And what that essentially means is that it'll have this extra negative charge on it. Now, that's all kind of jargony, but when you sort of look at the functions of these proteins in general, they always have to do, or they often have to do rather, with the binding of calcium. So a lot of people, when they think about calcium inside the body, they think about bones, right? They think about skeleton.
Definitely thinking about spooky skeletons and drinking milk. Skeletons that drink milk.
Well, actually, the sort of role in the structure of your skeleton is the secondary role of calcium. Its more important role is actually in signaling, which is something, basically the only way your muscles can contract is because calcium enters them, right? The only way your neurons fire is because calcium enters them.
That's doing a lot of work in there.
Exactly. It actually is really, really important. And the primary role of calcium, it's part of the reason why actually when you don't have enough calcium, your bones are the first to go, because in a sense, your bones serve as this reservoir of calcium. Yeah, because it's so important. And so vitamin K does this very specific modification. It's called carboxylation. And it is essentially able to make these proteins more negatively charged. And for a lot of these really classical proteins that are carboxylated, it allows them to be able to fold properly and bind calcium, and that's kind of part of the whole package here.
Sounds important.
And how does that connect to coagulating? Sorry, was that about what you were about to say?
Actually, I sort of want to move a little bit away from coagulating because
with that old hat, only for Germans.
Yeah.
yes, but again, I think it's part of why the nomenclature is part of, I think, why it got pigeonholed. But in fact, our lab is beginning to discover that there might be a bunch of other proteins that have nothing to do with coagulation whatsoever that are also carboxylated. And obviously, when you look at biology, you want to be approaching from several different angles. Like, I told you a little bit about the chemistry, but also from the clinical aspect, we know that vitamin K actually seems to protect against the development of type 2 diabetes.
Wow.
So yeah, there was these clinical studies where essentially patients who were at risk, they had things like hypertension, obesity, things like this. They were given vitamin K, and that cohort was found to have a 50% reduced risk of developing type 2 diabetes.
Whoa.
So it's not usually when you think about these clinical studies, often, even effects of 10%, 5% are pretty good. But so that one, it found like a 50%, so which is quite strange because we there was basically no real explanation for why a coagulation vitamin was doing all of this.
It's probably doing something else.
Exactly. And so one thing that our lab did was we took mice and we sort of ground up various organs from the mouse. I know.
Sorry, mice.
Sorry, mice. But we were trying to basically look at, so how vitamin K is used by that enzyme, right? So we were trying to look for where that enzyme was in the body, and where it most is in the liver, which is not surprising because that's where all the clotting factors are made. Okay, but the place where it was second most abundant is actually the pancreas. Exactly. The
Nailed
pancreas.
It.
Yeah.
That's the diabetes connection.
That's the diabetes connection. And so specifically the pancreatic islets. So to sort of describe that a little bit, your pancreas is this little organ that's sort of right behind your stomach, and it produces both these digestive juices that allow you to basically digest your food. So that's part of
I need that.
Yes, it's very important. But equally as important is these little clusters inside of the pancreas. They literally look like these little balls, and they're called the islets of Langerhans. And these will produce.
You could take a vacation there.
I was going to say, that sounds wizardly.
That does sound wizardly. A wizard would live on the islets of Langerhans.
They actually do kind of look like that. When you section the pancreas and look at them under the microscope, they look like almost these swirling balls because they're like stained purplish. Whoa. But anyways, these will produce a number of hormones that essentially signal to your body the various nutrient states. And the most important one for diabetes is the beta cells, which will produce insulin. Insulin, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it. It basically signals that there's sugar in the blood. And when you have a failure of these things, number one, it's quite dangerous because if you have too much sugar in your blood, it'll become too thick, cause clots.
Like a
it's very
Slurpee.
dangerous. Exactly. And the other bad thing about it is that it will make it so that your liver and your fats and whatnot will be unable to take up that sugar and convert it into long-term stores. So diabetic people not only have to worry a lot about having too much sugar in their blood, they also constantly have to be worried about not having enough sugar because they don't have those backup stores. So basically we set about, it was weird to us because no carboxylated protein other than the enzyme itself actually could sort of explain the effect that we saw. So we did this crazy method called mass spectroscopy, where we purify,
or if as a wizard would call it,
throwing a piano down a staircase, listening to the
it.
tinkles and finding the notes.
that's what a wizard would do.
He had me at tinkles.
That's exactly what it is, though, because you take all these proteins in the cell, you smash them, you smash them together, you have all these electrons and spikes flying off of it, and basically a rather complex algorithm will be able to interpret what proteins are in there. And really the best example, and I think I saw it on TV before, actually it was used to describe the Hadron Collider.
Right.
And the guy was saying it's like trying to find all the notes on a piano by throwing it down the stairs and hearing all the tinkles.
That is pretty. It's a pretty good analogy.
Yeah. So using this, we basically identified some new proteins, completely new proteins that
hot new proteins.
Exactly, hot new proteins.
Dropped.
We call them novel. That's the sort of science term.
New is not good. Novel better.
That's right. These novel gamma carboxylated proteins. So our current work is basically in characterizing all of these proteins and finding out what the heck they're doing, because they're not clotting proteins. They're kind of something completely.
So we got a whole bunch of mysterious proteins.
That's right.
I love it.
Have you named any proteins after yourself? Is that a dream?
See, I tried to. I didn't think about it.
Yeah.
I've definitely thought about it, or name it some acronym that sounds really silly once you, these backronyms. But
right.
Unfortunately, a lot of these proteins, they already have established gene names, so we decided to just go. Yeah, I know. I have to say, though, I think that part of the reason why proteins have less ridiculous names nowadays is because the field is less male dominated.
Nice, good job.
Because back in the 80s and 70s, you were having Sonic Hedgehog protein, I can't swear on the podcast.
Sure.
Can I?
Sure.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
There's an enzyme where the acronym spells out motherfucker, basically.
I mean, you're gonna live to regret that.
Yeah, that's like getting a tattoo of your favorite cereal.
I mean, again, imagine a time where the lab was just filled with 20-something men. These things will happen.
It's all they had. So at this point, I guess your lab doesn't have any big clues as to what the relationship is. It's still a bit of a mystery between vitamin K and diabetes.
We think calcium. So,
okay.
Yeah, exactly. Because I actually ran a recent experiment where I took one of these kind of novel gamma carboxylated proteins. And I ran an experiment where I took radioactive calcium. Because the thing is, it's hard to see these really small things, right? You need to come up with weird tricks to do it. So basically, I just took the protein that was either grown without vitamin K, so it doesn't have this carboxylation, or I took the protein that we grew it with vitamin K, so it has the modification that requires vitamin K on it. And you put it on this membrane, and then you just pour radioactive calcium on it. You wash it off. Wow. And based on the amount of radioactive calcium that's still stuck to the protein, you know how much calcium it binds. And so far I've seen that at least the way it looks, the vitamin K modified carboxylated protein, it binds double the amount of calcium that the other one does. So there's definitely probably something there. It's also a lot of what I'm currently doing right now is these microscopy experiments where we're taking cells, culturing them with or without vitamin K, and then essentially putting in a drug that causes the calcium to rush out. So we're seeing basically its calcium rushing ability. The way that we're able to visualize that is with this really, and this is another magic thing that I'm not entirely sure how it works, but we load up the cells with this indicator that when there's calcium inside the cell,
call it magic powder.
The magic powder. No, it seriously basically is it when there's calcium, the cells glow. It really looks like magic. You put it in, you're imaging it, and they just start to twinkle, and it's quite beautiful to look at, actually.
When I first learned in undergrad of microbiome, molecular bio, it sounded dreadfully boring, but the way you describe it sounds so amazing. They need to teach this. They need to talk about this in undergrad.
See, the thing is, I think if you want to be a good biochemist, you need to enjoy Dungeons and Dragons.
That's the key. That's
Kevin's always said that.
I've said that for years.
Yes, because you need to be able to get excited over like a dice roll. You know, you're like 20, yeah. Because I think part of the problem with how they teach it is they divorce it too much from the experiments, right? These sort of crazy radioactive stuff, you know, this magical component to it. And instead, they just show you diagrams of lists and lists and diagrams and circle charts. Yeah. All these clouds, pink cloud interacts with gray cloud, you know, and
although those are great wizard battles.
That is true.
Pink cloud versus gray cloud.
I thought pink cloud would win.
No, gray cloud has the staff of calcium.
It's true though. Like it's funny. So I teach college biology, and we have like one class the whole semester where we talk about the people behind the science, and it comes together this beautiful story where we talk about the experiments and like how they resulted in these conclusions and where they were wrong, which you also never talk about in school, you know. And it's my favorite class to teach because you really see how science happens versus just these disembodied figures that came out of somewhere.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's really a big weakness in the way science is taught, right? Because it's part of the reason I think that there's so much confusion about a lot of the COVID information going out, because, you know, people, they know what a virus is, right? They know what sickness and all of these things are, but they're often being just straight told, right? Masks are bad. Listen to your doctors. Don't do it. Wait, no, now they're good. You know, of course people are going to get confused, right?
Yeah, people don't get used to how science is fluid too. That weird.
No, people have this amazing idea that science is either this or this rather than, especially on the cutting edge where there's so much uncertainty, instead of like, it is A and B and C and that is it.
Like,
because it's how
D.
it's taught.
And it is, it's presented as, if you've only ever done science up until like say high school, which probably is the experience of the majority of the general population, then it becomes it's presented as this has been established, and then everything new, the further you go through academia, the more you realize, there's so much we don't know. And then now that we have to deal with something unknown, it's like, the science is being done right now, and we probably won't establish as much certainty about things for years to come.
And so many of the things that we are already operating on, like the drugs we use in hospitals and whatnot, there is no certainty about a lot of those, right?
Hope for the best.
Yeah. So Kevin, how did you get into this whole field in the first place? Like, what were you ever, like, you've mentioned other interests. So what led you down this path?
I like to think of it as a sort of butterfly effect chain, where essentially I had applied for, I didn't actually directly apply for culinary school at the time, but I had applied for film school and biochemistry actually over in
a natural pairing.
Yes. And essentially my parents, being the good Asian parents that they are, were like, no, don't do filmmaking. And I was like, no, but I like it. It's something that maybe I should try. They said, listen, it's probably easier to become a filmmaker than a scientist, which is untrue, but I bought it at the time, and they were just like, why don't you try for that first? And if you don't like it, you can make a U-turn. I was like, okay, I'll try it. I ended up going into my first year of biochemistry, and as is the experience of so many people in first year biochem, absolutely hated it. Because hated the clouds and all of those things, and was really discouraged by my first year of university actually. But then
it's tough.
And I actually originally come right before I came to university, I was living in this like tropical part of China too, so lots of sun, and all of a sudden biochem and sunsets at 4:30, and it was really rough. But then I started dating a girl who was in med school at the time, and I was just like, nah, I gotta continue, gotta maybe try for medical school. And that was my motivation until she dumped me.
Because you weren't enthusiastic enough about the cloud.
I guess not. It's But,
Sorry to
but
bring that up, Kevin. Are you okay?
I'm okay now, but
Good.
I was definitely because for me it wasn't just the breakup. It was I made the rather foolhardy decision of basing some of my career path
Of course.
choices on it, right?
You would not be the first or the last.
Yes, and I basically told one of the professors that I had a class with at the time, like he was just really nice guy. His name's Alvin Schreier. He's over at McGill, and he actually I was doing this little mentorship thing with him, and he approached me. He was like, "Oh, you look kind of down," and I was like, "Yeah, I just got dumped. I don't really know what to do." He was like, "Oh, that sucks, man. But I mean, if you want to like do something like a master's, we have openings in our lab. So you can try
Whoa.
that." Yeah, and that was it, right? And that's another thing that if anybody's looking into doing grad school, go talk to the profs. Talk to them,
Right.
get to know them, not just their research.
Also, get dumped. Sounds like just heartbreak.
Honestly, heartbreak is one of the most informative and growing experiences that I've ever had.
Of course it is, yeah.
That is the wildest pitch for grad school I've ever heard.
Yeah.
You're
yeah.
sad? You think this feels bad? Why don't you do a master's?
Yeah.
Real pain.
No, but it wasn't pain enough for me, right? Because I went
Right.
ahead and went to go get a PhD. So
So what do you remember the moment where you went from hating it? You stuck with it for med school, girl. But like, when did you fall? Because you're clearly very enthusiastic about it, or you're a great actor, or you're both, Kevin. When did you fall in love with biomolecules?
actually, during my master's, because and this is kind of a bit of a, not every single lab that you go to will kind of be suitable for where you are at the time that you join it, right? It's something that we sort of touched on beforehand. I really felt like Dr. Schreier's lab was really what I needed at the time, because he was an older tenured professor, so he was more laid back, but it just gave me so much space to explore. He had even kind of put me in charge of ordering things for the lab, which I don't know was a good idea or not. I could even buy
Lots
whatever
of
reagents
pizzas.
oh, it goes beyond that. I would buy like, these $500 tubes of antibodies and be like, whoops, I misread the label. This is actually for the wrong protein, but goodness. Yeah. But he was so nice about it all. And I think he gave me so much space too, because I feel like when you're in undergrad and you're basically, your grades are being judged by whether or not gray cloud or whatever, and you transition into a space where you're playing with gray cloud. Let's throw gray cloud into a tube and see what happens, right? Maybe it does. And outside of that, also I think in undergrad, yeah, you have friends, but a lot of times your friends aren't there to kind of like directly help you in what you're doing. And in that lab setting, the sort of camaraderie of like trying to sort of figure out these problems together and whatnot was really good. And it's put me in a place where I realized that this was something that I could have a passion for and something that I was willing to put my weight behind. And that's why for my PhD, then, I wanted to choose a lab where I knew the supervisor was probably going to push me a little, and I knew that they were really wanting to get things done and really wanting to sort of like hold us to a higher standard. I think that if I had joined a lab like that, coming out of my breakup, I would have left just hating science, being like, this is terrible. But because sort of both of these labs came into my life at the appropriate time, I think it sort of helped foster this.
Yeah. So Kevin, tell me a little bit more just about like, what were you like as a kid? Like, were you always curious? Did you like, I'm going to be a scientist? Or were you like, I'm going to go to culinary school and make movies about food?
Definitely a bit of both. So a high school teacher of mine, I think he was quoting some British philosopher when he said this, but he said there are two different types of people. There are hedgehogs and there are foxes. Some people who are hedgehogs, they dig one hole, they become really good at that hole, really invested. Other people, they're like fox. They like to dig a little here, dig a little there, and I was definitely kind of the fox type. Science was naturally appealing to me just because there was so much about so many different things. You could watch a documentary about nature one day, and then physics the other. My parents also really encouraged these sorts of things. My mom would buy us like these illustrated encyclopedias with these beautiful images, and she loved watching documentaries and stuff like that at night. So we would see all of these things, right? And I think that was really, really important for just making science accessible to me, first of all, but also allowing this interest to grow when I was younger. And I think another really important thing that kind of came to shape my relationship with science is because I had so much contact with science outside of school. I was able to kind of see it as something that was apart from my personal achievement. So even if I was bad at physics, so I'm not very good at math, I'm not good at physics, I still love physics, it's like really, really fascinating to me.
As you should.
Yeah. Yes.
So you mentioned you thought of being a chef. Is there like a number one Kevin recipe? What's your number one thing to cook?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Or what are some of your go-tos?
No, one. Choose
Just
one.
one. Yeah.
Just one. Hey. Well, I am rather recently proud because it was something I mastered over the pandemic is these Hokkaido milk buns that I finally figured out how to perfect. They require so much kneading. I don't have like a standing mixer, so I do that all by hand. It takes 6 hours to make, and there's just so much love inside them that when you eat them, you really feel all the work.
Can you tell me what's
gone
inside one? I'm dying to know.
So the main things are really just like milk, eggs, butter, flour, yeast. It's kind of that normal bread composition with a little bit more fats, I suppose, and milk. But what really makes it special is that it incorporates an ingredient called tanjong, which essentially is almost like a rice flour pudding that you make first. Or it's not rice flour, it's just normal flour pudding that you make over the stove. Or you can make it in a microwave, but it becomes this gloopy mixture that you incorporate into the dough, and it makes it kind of like hold on to its moisture and gives it that like beautiful gloopiness, like elastic texture. Yeah.
Whoa. How do they survive in the post? And will you be sending us a couple?
But of course.
That sounds amazing.
Wow, very cool. Well, I think you should go back to culinary school, Kevin. I want to go to your milk bun restaurant.
Well, tell you what, working in a biochemistry lab is a lot like working in a restaurant in many, many ways. Yeah.
Plus, all that milk has so much calcium.
Vitamin K. Vitamin K. Brought it together. So what's next for Kevin? So you're doing your PhD. We won't ask when you're going to finish. Everyone hates that question. But do you have aspirations, or are you just enjoying the moment?
So when I told my parents that I was going to do a PhD, they were actually pretty upset about it. So
whoa, hold on.
Whoa.
They're like, where's my film son? My son is going to make a movie.
They switched.
I guess it was mostly my dad that was more upset about it, because he was hoping that I would go into business or finance or something like that, And it's funny because when you sort of asked about if I grew up wanting to be a scientist, it is true. Part of me did want to grow up to become a scientist, but part of me didn't really, also because my dad was a professor for a couple of years, and that's going to sound kind of bad, but it was true because I saw him kind of like come home so late all the time, stressing out about grants and whatnot. And that was probably the primary thing that pushed me away from that. But and now he's left science. He's doing business in China right now and doing pretty well for himself. So I think he really sort of wanted both my sister and I actually to follow more a path like that. So actually, just last week, I had gotten a scholarship for 3 more years, the NSERC scholarship.
Congrats,
Thank you.
Kevin.
Nice.
But when I told my dad about it, he called me all concerned, like, Kevin, does this mean that you're going to stay in academia? Does this mean that, business is still a viable option for you? And I was like, relax, Dad, it's just a scholarship. I didn't get like a tenure track position. but yeah, honestly, I think things are pretty difficult right now, and it at risk of sounding a little bit political, like my family is all in China.
Oh yeah.
And the last year or so has been a bit worrying about the relationship between the two sides. And
Mhm.
I would hate to kind of be stuck here in a sense. I would also hate to be stuck over there, to be honest,
Yeah.
because I do really love Canada as well. And because before all of this, one of my biggest aspirations was to kind of be able to run back and forth, maybe be a professor or even work in sort of a biotech company, as sort of like a research science or a sort of R&D scientist, and be able to sort of communicate with companies or universities in both countries, right? And I really, really hope that, cooler heads will prevail and that sort of world will be possible. But we gotta hope. Yeah.
Well, Kevin, you are clearly such a star.
Yeah, it's a real delight talking to you.
Yeah,
real delight talking to you guys too.
You are such a great science communicator too. So I think I hope you get to share your passion with young scientists, because that's how we're going to keep them on our side.
We need more vitamin-based role-playing games. I think that's what I've learned.
That's a great idea.
That would be great. A really exciting tabletop game about vitamins.
Which class of vitamin do you want to be?
Ooh, bees.
Yes.
Have you heard of the anime Cells at Work?
Yes, I have heard of that one. It's a great one.
I need to get into anime. I didn't know that's where this meeting was going to go, but clearly I need to get into anime.
We'll watch some Cells at Work and you'll get into it.
I didn't know there was so much science-based anime. That's how you sell it me on it.
Yeah. Kevin, it was such a delight to get to talk with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Kevin. That was Kevin Guo from Matthew Ferrand's lab.
I learned so much about vitamins today.
That was super cool. See, like when I was in undergrad, I avoided, like after my intro bio class, I was like, cells, boo, plants, boo, animals are where it's at. And that was all because my one unit of intro bio on ecology had an awesome professor who sadly died actually during final exams of my last year of undergrad. It was really tragic.
Sad, yeah.
He died really tragically. Anyway, but that one professor changed the course of my life. Like I was excited about a topic I'd never really been interested in. And it's crazy how something so small, right? The presentation of this information has such a power over the course of your life.
You never know what's going to capture the imagination of somebody and then get them fired up about it. And I think that's a universal. I think that's true probably in any field, but you never know what alley you're going to wander down in science and be like, oh, this is interesting, and then just dedicate the rest of your life to following it.
It feels like there's too much of a premium paid on facts instead of how we get them.
Yeah,
that's the fun
it's not
stuff.
just about delivering the facts, but how you present them that I think really can make a difference.
But also like how you figure out information, like how do you do science? What is an experiment? All those sorts of things. That's so exciting.
Yeah, it's not just how science is actually done on the ground, and talking to all these amazing people, I hope is illuminating.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool stuff. Well, Vinny, this has been a blast.
I've had a great time.
I've learned
plenty about bats.
Yes, about planets.
Yeah, and vitamin K.
And why moons aren't planets.
Yeah, correct.
And vitamin K and wizards.
And wizards. I mean, we can always stand to learn more about wizards.
Yeah, maybe we'll take a vacation to the Islets of Langerhans one time.
And face off against Grey Cloud, the wizard.
Pink Cloud's going to win.
No,
in the reboot.
My money's on Grey Cloud, don't
you're
you?
Going down. All right, thank you for joining us for Learn Real Good. Thanks again to Kevin. I'm Katie saying goodbye.
And I'm Vinny saying goodbye. Thanks for joining us.